And welcome back. So I figured I would take this opportunity to do a little bit of a parts update slash status video. And over the last few days, the cam, the non-MDS lifters, and the hardened push rods did arrive for our rebuild. The cam is in the hands of the machine shop per their request. Hopefully within the next few days, their installer will be able to fit the cam to the block they've machined and verify the clearances and let us know it's okay to come pick it up. And then obviously once we get that short block, we'll begin, and don't worry, I'll bring you along and we'll film all this, but we'll do the assembly of the long block. With that being said, what you're seeing here, as we stated in a previous video, that we were going to upgrade our engine stand. If you remember a previous one, which is over here amongst some of the old parts we took off of our engine before going to the machine shop, this is the one that we went out and quickly bought the day we pulled the motor just to have something to mount it to. And like I said, this will get the job done, but if you remember, just the weight of the block with nothing else on it was enough to cause it to tip forward, bind this apparatus, and you couldn't rotate the engine on it. So I can only imagine how bad it would bind once the block had cylinder heads, front timing cover, exhaust manifolds, and everything else mounted to it. So did a little bit of research, and then what you see here, you can see it has a very similar construction. It's got fold-up legs, much like our engine hoist does. It's rated for, show you this here, it's rated for 1,250 pounds, and hopefully you saw that there. Let me make sure you can see that. There we go. You can see it's put out by Omega, and that's the particular model number of this engine stand. You can already see a big difference in the mechanism. You can see, hopefully you can see kind of the edge of a bearing in there. So this whole assembly rides on a bearing, which can then be cranked by hand to spin the engine over as you're working on it. So much beefier mechanism, much beefier holder, longer legs for more stability. But we'll see how this holds up once we get the short block back and we start to assemble that short block into a long block. We'll see how exactly easy or non-easy it is to turn this mechanism. But in my opinion, the fact that this has a bearing in here this rides on is much better than what we have over here, where this surface in here is just metal on metal, and when this flexes forward enough, it causes that to pinch and then you can't rotate it. So I'll put a link in the description to where I got this, and I will warn you, there's going to be a little bit of a sticker shock with it. It's not the most expensive engine stand you can get, but it's also not the cheapest you could get either. Now, keep in mind, part of the justification I used to get this is that this is going to be more than just a 1 or 2 time use for us. As you remember, we got some plans for the 2012 Ram that's right behind the garage here, as well as other future work coming up in which this engine stand is going to come in, very useful. Again, provided that it works to the task that we need. Let's spin around here, and you can see this is the treasure trove of parts awaiting engine reassembly. But what I wanted to show you was the lifters have arrived. And what these are a complete set of, they kind of have a name associated with them at this point in time. A lot of individuals in a lot of places will refer to these as quote-unquote Hellcat lifters. What they are is just the upgraded from Mopar non-MDS lifters. Because you'll notice none of these lifters in this set of 4 have the MDS hole in it, so they're not meant to collapse for cylinder deactivation. As you remember in the previous video, we also got these plugs here, in which we'll be blocking off the MDS solenoids and then disabling MDS within the engine computer altogether. So this will be part of that. The cam is from my tuner, Jay Green. It is what he refers to as a sleeper cam. So it's stage 1.5. Per him, it is a cam that will work with the standard stock software, so it doesn't require a customized tune. So it'll give us a wider power band from my understanding, but not so much that it requires a custom tune, which is nice. Because again, where this vehicle is going, the donee that's receiving this, we're going to upgrade it a little bit, but we're still using stock components to do it. But we're not altering it so much in a way that if it has to be brought to another Mopar dealer or another Chrysler technician, that they shouldn't be able to kind of figure out what's going on with it. Because when you get into doing things like custom tunes, although they're nice, then it becomes an issue. If you bring it in for service work, you have to make sure they don't update or flash the computer, because they'll flash it back to factory software. And if you require a custom tune, next thing you know, you're dead in the water until you can put your custom tune back. So these were the hardened push rods that I was referring to as well. So both intake and exhaust. And you can see some of the differences on the ends of these rods alone. And this is a standard factory push rod. You can just kind of see how the ball end is attached to the rod end on both of these. And you compare that difference with the upgraded set. Now, again, we're going hardened push rods on this. Not that we're, necessarily pushing the amount of horsepower that would require a hardened push rod. I mean, it was only a cost-wise a little bit more for a nice upgraded set of push rods versus what a new factory set we're going to run. And like I said, we're already in there doing a complete MDS delete, a slightly upgraded cam. While we're in there, I figured we might as well just throw some hardened push rods into the mix. Other items that have come in that we'll be doing replacements on. You'll see it right here. I originally bought this ARP head bolt kit. Now this isn't studs, these are all bolts. This is for a Hemi 5, 7, 6, 1, and 6, 4. This is the same kit we used when we did the performance upgrades on the 6.4 2500 in that video series. And you may be asking yourself the question, why am I going through a little bit of added expense here to put an ARP set of head bolts in it when we can just use the factory ones that we've already purchased over here? Well, to be honest with you, I pre-ordered these months ago when they were on back order. And my original thought was we would use these for the 2012. But I got to thinking about it. They're here. I really, really like these bolts. These can be just like the Chrysler bolts. Now, Chrysler states you can reuse their head bolts, provided you examine them and you're not seeing evidence where they have stretched. They can be reused. ARP can be reused. The torquing sequence, I like the torquing sequence on the ARPs better. They torque in increments of 25, 50, 75, and 100, then you stop. So unlike the Chrysler ones where it's, I believe it's, I forget the exact number sequence, but you torque it to a certain foot-pounds, 1 pass, 2 pass, and then you do a final pass at 90 degrees. You don't do the 90 degrees with the ARP fasteners. And again, yes, this is a little bit of added expense that we didn't necessarily have to do, but since the kit's here, I've used these before. I really, really like these bolts. Since we're putting the hardened push rods in, the non-MDS lifters, and the slightly upgraded cam, we might as well slap on a decent set of head bolts considering we're also getting the block machined. Again, now we're in the kind of the mode of, or at least my opinion, in the mode of working to also protect what we've invested into the work that's been done, you know, thus far. Again, not saying that the factory head bolts wouldn't work. They absolutely would. It's just that these were, again, they were on back order for about, it's about a good 3 or 4 months. They finally came in. I was going to use them for the 2012. I figured we'll use them for this build. And when it comes time for us to do the work on the 2012, I'll just order another set of these bolts. Let's see. I think you've seen these before, but we ordered a couple of replacement cam bolts, a couple of replacement crank bolts, because Chrysler states that the cam and crank bolts are supposed to be replaced. They're not supposed to be reused, although I see people reuse the crank bolts all the time. They're just fine, you know, to each their own. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me show you the part number on that set. So that ARP set is a 147-3901. You'll notice it lists a 5.7 and 6.1 Hemi. If you go back and watch the 2500 build series, I actually emailed them prior to using this set on the 6.4, and they replied back and said it's the exact same kit for 6.4. And as you've watched the previous videos for the other build, you'll see they worked out just fine. The other thing I like about these, I forgot to mention, is that the heads are a 12-point configuration. Much better grip as far as the socket's concerned, in my opinion. What we have here is a new oil pressure switch or sensor, however you want to call it. There's your part number there. We also have 2 temperature sensors. There's your part number there. This temperature sensor that is used for coolant is also, in this particular Ram, the same temperature sensor that is used for oil. That's why we have 2 of them. We're going to replace them both. Okay, down here in this box of parts that have arrived, went ahead and picked up another new tensioner. There's nothing wrong with the tensioner we took off this engine. If you remember, we did a whole new timing setup when we did the first upper end rebuild. I get a little paranoid with my tensioners. Since it was installed and removed, I went ahead and bought another tensioner. These are actually pretty inexpensive. It's some pretty cheap insurance, and that way I know when this engine gets, when the long block gets assembled, then what will go on is a brand new tensioner to go along with the chain that we took off and the guide, because remember, everything was new. So this will be newer of the set, but again, the chain that we put on, the guide that we put on, and the lower crank sprocket will still be the one that we used when we did the upper engine rebuild. Again, this is just me being paranoid, but I'd rather throw a new tensioner on it than reused one, even though it only had a short lifespan of use. And just in case we need it, not going to say that we do, if you want to see that part number again, that is for the chain for this 2009 5.7. In case we run into an issue with the timing chain when we take it out of the bag that it's being stored in with some oil. If I see any imperfection on that at all, I went ahead and just ordered one. If we don't use this for this particular buildup, then we'll just save this for what could possibly be used for the other project when we start that 2012. Picked up another set of spark plugs. These are a little bit different than the last iridium plugs we had. These are laser iridium versus the IX iridium. Now, based on what I can find on the research on this, is that these are designed to be, as you can see here, extra long life. These actually have a little bit, or I should say a longer lifespan per NGK than what the IX iridium plugs that we used the first time did. Now these aren't the part numbers for the 5.9, but to give you an example, that's what we did when we did the first rebuild on the upper end. It was the iridium IX. These supposedly have a shorter lifespan than these laser iridium plugs. Again, we're in there. We're going to throw 16 new spark plugs at it. And don't worry, the plugs that we took out of the engine when we did the teardown from the failed upper end rebuild, we still have them. They're still perfectly fine. I'm going to put them in storage. I'll keep them as spares or perhaps use them for another project. These guys here might look familiar from the previous videos. Now these are matte black. They're not a gloss black, which is fine by me. These are the wheel lug covers. Think of them as a hubcap for those big fuel rims that are on that truck right now, that silver truck that we've been working on. And you might think, why pick new ones of these up? Well, I'll show you. This is one of the ones that came off the truck as we've been working on it. Again, these are gloss black, but this centerpiece just clips in like a hubcap would to this bottom piece. The bottom piece has majority of fake Allen bolts. It has 2 Allen bolts there on the side that actually secure this to the rim. And this piece just snaps into that. However, just because due to age and because of this being plastic and heat cycles, watch what happens when we do this. Hopefully you can see that. You see how warped this piece of plastic is. These do not clip into these worth anything anymore. You could literally just try to clip it in and take a little bit of light pressure like that and push them right out. So my fear was on these was that once you got on a pretty good clip, especially going down the highway, that this is going to become a safety issue. It's going to pop out of that rim and this is going to go flying off into the stratosphere somewhere. So they were cheap enough and easy enough to find. I just ran the part number for the old units and found these. The only difference is these are just matte black. The nice thing is each one of those, and we did order a whole new set, so we got 4 of them, came with new hardware, new mounting hardware, and of course each one came with a little Allen key to put it back on with, to tighten those bolts with. So again, this is kind of more of a cosmetic slash safety concern than what would be considered needed just to get the truck up and operational. And yes, if you haven't seen them already, all 8 new ignition coils. Again, changing, adding, or replacing a part because I'm not wanting to go back into this with previously used hardware. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. And just like we did when we did the upper end rebuild the first time, if you remember, we reused all the ignition coils. But if you go back and look at the video, ignition coil number 1 actually had a problem that we had to grab a ignition coil off our donor 1500 and get it swapped out. So at least one of those old ignition coils we know had a problem. And not wanting to pull 8 used coils off our donor, since everything else going into this engine is off the shelf new, we bit the bullet a little bit on this one. And granted, these aren't OEM because the cost of the OEM coil is a little bit on the absurd side, if you ask me. There's your part number there. They're NGK. So we've got NGK oxygen sensors. We've got NGK spark plugs. We're going to finish it up with NGK ignition coils. Again, to the tune of 8 of them. Now, we're introducing a little bit of an unknown. 8 ignition coils. the likelihood that one of these is going to be bad, it's possible, especially in today's market. I can't tell you how many times I've seen other videos of individuals getting brand new parts like this and it be bad out of the box. So we could have one or two of these coils. Hopefully none are bad, but it's always a possibility because we're introducing something new. But again, that's why you're seeing 8. So again, since we're getting the machine work done and we're pouring all this new product into this engine, you know, going to go in with nice new fresh plugs, nice new fresh coils, and so on and so forth. Again, just minimizing. You can look at it 2 ways. We're minimizing our risk by making sure that what we're putting in is off the shelf new, but in the same breath, we could also be adding some potential risk with the way parts are these days as well. But we shall see. I'm not sure if I can't remember if I put this in a previous video, but I went ahead and picked up yet another intake gasket set. I wasn't liking the way the Felpro set was looking, and I've used them all before for intake gaskets and been happy with them. And as you can see, it gives you all the gaskets you need for the intake when you go to put that back on. We already covered the flex plate mounting hardware in a previous video, and what you see here, there's your part number there. That is for the spin-on filter for the transmission service when we get to it. And I have another box. Actually, I think I may have already showed that to you, but no, actually I don't think I have. I made comment on it. So there's 2 filters inside this transmission, just like on the 2500. There's a spin-on transmission filter inside the transmission oil pan. That's that one. Then there's there's a second filter inside that transmission pan. That's this one. And of course the accompanied fluid. And again, just like I said in the previous video, this is not something that I want to do until after we have the engine in and we've gotten in and be able to drive it and verify that we don't have any drivability with issues with the transmission, because I don't want to throw 2 new filters in it and a bunch of fluid just to find out that we've got a potential transmission issue. So let's see here. I think we've covered all the new stuff that has come in thus far. Yeah, I think that is it. I think actually one more item. I'm sorry. What you see here, let me get you a part number. Oh, once I can find it, there it is on the other side of the box. This is the AC condenser electric fan for a 2009 Ram 1500. I'll show you the original one we took out. In a previous video, you heard me comment that we were doing some additional electrical troubleshooting, which is why we were making sure that all of our grounds were temporarily reattached on our engine harness. Well, this is the fan we took out, original OEM Denso AC condenser fan. This fan's bad. Now, all data in its diagrams shows that the fan in this truck is being a 2-speed fan. So it would spin at low speed, spin at high speed. That's not the case. That's not what we have. So their diagrams are incorrect. The way this fan works is just 2 pins. It's just power and ground. It just feeds it the beans, spins it at full revolutions once it gets power. So all I did, again, just testing this, because what I'm doing is I was kind of playing a hunch based on several factors about why that engine failed and some stuff that we found when we first got the truck. I was looking for reasons that the truck may have also been overheated. So I just attach 12 volts to this connector directly, that fan didn't spin at all. Now you could take the fan once you applied power and gently spin it like that, and it would slowly start to turn, but that's all you would get out of it. So again, we did discover that this condenser fan is bad. Now the condenser fan, my understanding, will come on if the truck gets hot enough, but it's not the primary means of cooling. The primary means of cooling is your normal mechanical clutch cooling fan you see there in the ground. But that condenser fan will come on when you're running the air conditioning. It's to give the truck additional cooling capacity because of the load that you're placing on it by running the air conditioner. Now, knowing where that truck came from, absolutely, the area they had it in would have definitely been running the air conditioner. And with that condenser fan being bad, they would have had poor air conditioning performance. Plus, they would have been putting an extra strain on the engine that would have required additional cooling capacity that they wouldn't have, that basically wasn't there and should have been there. And if you couple that with driving in city traffic and heat, running an air conditioner, chances are, and again, just going by some of the symptoms, if you remember when we very first got the truck and we were looking at things, I made a comment that the wife noticed that if you looked at the original coolant we drained out of that truck, there was some oil in the coolant, which kind of made it lead to a potential head gasket failure. So just kind of keeping some of this stuff in mind, why we have the downtime to do it, because we're still waiting for the block to come back from the machine shop. Started looking at things that could possibly explain, well, did it overheat? So that's what led us to kind of start looking at and making sure that condenser fan worked, and then we discovered that it was bad and unfortunately also needed to be replaced. Let's see, and I think that is it. So with that being said, again, just to kind of recap it, the cam is in. I can't show that to you because the machine shop has it. We're waiting for their installer to test fit it to verify the clearances and the cam bearings. Once they've done that and they've given it the go-ahead, then obviously they'll give me a ring. Contact me. We'll go down there and get it picked up, and we'll start the process of taking all the parts you see spread across the table and the floor and everywhere else, and getting that long block assembled to get that engine finally dropped back in to that vehicle. So we'll bring you along for the ride. We will definitely video this for you. So there'll at least be one, if not two more videos coming out that'll cover that short block to long block buildup. And then obviously we'll bring you along when we finally do get this engine dropped back into this truck, turn the key for the first time, cross our fingers and hope, that nothing comes flying out the bottom of it. With that being said, hopefully this helped you out a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Just noticed some stuff I didn't show you here. Get this out of the package. There's that part number there. What these are the fender liner screws to hold that plastic liner in place inside the wheel wells. Because remember, we've got the passenger wheel well to put back in, and I needed a couple extra fasteners I didn't have. We went ahead and also picked up, there's your part number there, a new PCV valve. And where the PCV valve sits, at least in this model of 1500, is right here on top of your intake. So that you actually turn this to get this to unlock. In my understanding, getting it out the first time can be a little bit of a bear. But again, because we're replacing everything that we're replacing and going back in with all these new fresh parts, it's a lot easier to replace this now than when it's inside the vehicle. And we're just kind of doing this as a preventative measure, because I have no way to prove it, but I can probably pretty much guarantee I don't think this has ever been changed out. And with the truck having 190,000 miles on it, again, just changing out for some cheap insurance. So I think that is finally everything at this point. So with that being said, if you haven't subscribed already, please consider to do so. Again, it's just continuing to grow the channel, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So yes, if you haven't subscribed already, and you managed to make it this far through my rambling, please consider to subscribe if you haven't already. Again, just continuing to try to grow the channel. As we grow the channel, it allows us to do more and more things. It gets us noticed. It gets us noticed by the algorithm. Once we get noticed by the algorithm, then our videos start to be suggested to others, which all kind of works together in a big domino, which helps increase viewership and so on and so forth. Because the more support we get, the easier it is to continue to do big builds like this and bring you even more in-depth information. So that being said, I'll let you go, and I'll keep you updated with the status as I get more information from the machine shop, and I'll chat at you later. Thank you much. Bye.